Good. Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody, and thanks for your wonderful input the last session. Really good discussion, and hope you enjoyed the bit of trivia there. Looks like somebody's having some sound issues. I assume others can still hear me. You can hear me, Kez.
I
Can't
can
you?
hear you, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know if they
Okay.
want to try checking their settings.
Yeah. You may need to log out and log back in, or there's an example of also why recordings happen. If your computer is malfunctioning in some way, there is the backup of the recording. Looks like it's all good for most people, so we will let another person have a tinker around with their settings. Actually, they wouldn't have heard that. Yeah, thank you, Cheston there. And I'll leave that to go behind the scenes. So we finished last session with our little example there of a formalisation or a sealing of a road and formalisation of an intersection and the challenges associated with that, just as our example of why we're really encouraging road safety audits across any infrastructure investment that alters the way people might use or perceive a road or road environment or road related area. And I think I like to use this one as an example. I mean, it's got particular characteristics. It's got visual deceit. It's got road safety engineering understanding, sort of 101 with see-through effects and cross traffic and bad angle crashes and continuous power lines and the like. And then it's got that upgrade, which on surface, taking it on face value, you'd think would improve road safety, but it goes the other way. So the bit I didn't get to at the end of last module, and this is last module stuff, but I'll just finish this off, round this off before we jump into some other information for module 2. We can undertake road safety audits at different stages of the life cycle of a road. So by the life cycle of a road, I mean sort of project phases or the like. So before anything is built, so in the planning, the feasibility design, road safety audits, preliminary design, or into the detailed design of upgrades, or when construction is happening. So they're going to be altering traffic management schemes, and the like. Just before they cut the ribbon and open this road or this new facility, a road safety audit can be done there. It's called a pre-opening. Or when we have just opened a road, or more often than not, it's been built in live traffic to a degree with some traffic management. So it's not really that there's an official sort of cutting of a ribbon and opening. There's a sort of immediate post-opening, and we have the ability to audit existing roads and what we as an industry term thematic audits as well. I'm going to just very briefly talk you through these, just so you know that audits can happen at different stages. So feasibility stage road safety audits are these, like I call them the planning audits. So you're very early on and you're thinking about alignments and maybe intersection form and locations of intersections and movements and how are people from gone forward? How are people from this area up here going to be getting down to this area down here, if that's a popular way they go, and how does that all work? And very high level stuff. You might get a bit more meat on your designs with some information, but not enough to really see what exactly is going to be how it's going to be done. This is sort of drifting then into preliminary concept design stage road safety auditing, where you might get more detail. You might get it on a survey base, you might get it on an aerial image, and you might be getting some more detail and really starting to understand things like lane widths and how it's going to configure. And then a detailed design road safety audit is where you are going to get the full design set. You're going to get the long sections, the cross sections, the drainage plans. You're going to get the pavement plans. You're going to get the signage and line marking plans, the signal phasing, and you're going to take all of that in and try and look for things that are going to be built that will present death or serious injury, or are not doing as good a job as they should in terms of reducing risk. There is a lot often in this to work through, and if you have a decent sized project and you have all of the design set, it can be hundreds of pages that you're pouring through and working through and trying to unpack and understand. And if you're not somebody who really spends a fair bit of time with this sort of documentation and can read a design quite easily and understand what is going to be built, and understand the long section and a cross section like that, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't add value to that audit, but it really hammers home the importance of having a team and having people in the team that can interpret this and see how it's going to be built and what issues are going to resolve. You may be there, if you're not quite at that stage of technical knowledge, be asking more generic questions and more sort of, I suppose, common sense type questions, which is really valuable and should be done. But do realise that there is a heavy technical requirement in these stages of auditing as well. And that can be very, specific technical things like to know that we have drivable culvert end walls. So I think most of us, hopefully, would be able to get our head around the fact that a culvert like that is presenting a roadside hazard. If somebody leaves the road and they hit that, they're going to stop abruptly, and it's very dangerous. And hopefully some of you are aware, and some maybe not, are aware though that we have drivable culvert end walls, which are these facilities you can see here and here. But the detailed knowledge is that you need to understand that there are two types of drivable culvert end walls. And one is for that longitudinal culvert, and one is for the culvert that runs across the road. And if the design has the wrong one in the wrong spot, we lose the effectiveness of it. And we've got a type 2 and a type 1, and there's specifics on them. And I popped this in just as another common road safety audit finding, is that they'll have put in or into their design type 1, possibly because they're not even aware there is a type 2 in the situation where it should be a type. There's some pretty specific stuff. Construction stage road safety audits. So we see a traffic management plan and a traffic guidance scheme, and we're looking into not only are they the correct signs and lines, but also all of those things in any road safety audit. How are people going to get from A to B? Maybe there is a McDonald's on this corner or something, and people are still going to want to go to McDonald's, so they will get their way to McDonald's to get their Big Mac, right? So how are they going to do that? Are we going to be putting them in danger to do that? Are they going to take new routes that are more dangerous? Are they going to cross the rail tracks at bad spots? Like, that's our role as auditors. I mean, it might tick absolute compliance with the code of conduct and the traffic, guidance scheme, but the way people will use it, and that's where we can step in. Pre-opening audit before the ribbon is cut, that's very much where you're doing that final check as an audit team. You get out there and check, are the barriers installed correctly? Is the overlap of the barrier rails right? Is the height of the barrier right? Is the line marking good? If they put the right coloured RRPMs in the right spot? Are the guideposts the right way around? Is there any confusing signage. This is our final check, and it's really, it's important that it's done. Now, quick prize for the first person who can find an issue with this. If you are asked to do your pre-opening, well, it's sort of post-opening this one because it's live for traffic. Any. I think I'll give it to Adele. I mean, I think Alistair and Logan have probably seen the issue, but trying to be a little bit too quick. We needed to know that the arrow was the wrong way around, wasn't it? So vehicle in this lane can go straight, vehicle in this lane can go right. We've got a sort of forced conflict. The stencil has just been put down upside down when they've done the line marking. And we can shake our head at it, but it happens, right? There should be, it shouldn't get through a surveillance officer's check or these sort of things. But auditors are that other set of eyes, and we still do see this sort of stuff happening. Unfortunately, but we hopefully can pick some of this up before it's opened up and before anything else. The existing condition road safety audit is a particular beast. Now, you're undertaking a road safety audit looking at what's existing, but I do always warn people about this. You could walk out the front of the door, right where you are now, audit the road or the street in front and find lots of issues. You could audit any road anywhere and find lots of issues, and they'll have varying risks and all. But I discourage councils and road authorities from undertaking network-wide road safety audits. Like, I often will see a road safety strategy, or they will suggest, when we're helping them develop a road safety strategy, that we should undertake road safety audits of all of our roads over the next 3 years. And I say, nah, I don't think that's good use of resources. That's going to cost you an absolute bomb. And you're going to get about, 10,000 issues out of it. And you won't have enough money to do, the top few of those. A better way to do it would be a filtering mechanism to start with. And there's, plenty of ways you can filter it down initially, and then maybe targeting a few roads with some road safety audits. But more valuable for me with existing conditions road safety audits are in some particular situations where, like this one, for example, which was where some new local area traffic management features have been put into place, and the community thought that they were dangerous and the council didn't, and there was lots of anger, and that you can call an independent road safety auditor in to to provide that independent judgment on safety. And it then, it takes it away from that. That's what the independent auditor has said, and it can work quite well from that perspective. There's other situations where it can work quite well. Okay, that was sort of just covering off some of those specific audits. The other one I should mention is thematic audits. I don't know why I haven't grabbed that in as well, but thematic audits are where we take a particular road user and we just go into more and more depth about the needs of that road user. Now, you can do like bicycle road safety audits, which is where you get on a bike and you ride, and maybe the whole team rides, and you're really thinking about all of the bike safety features. But mind you, in any road safety audit, you should be thinking about bikes and their needs. This one, you just might do a lot more biking and the like. Pedestrian, motorcycle audits, popular motorcycle route. You get a motorcyclist to ride, following car with audit team and kitting up with the rider. I'll show you this when I talk about motorcyclists later. So thematic audits are a possibility. Okay, so that gets us to a point where we'll launch into now the steps of a road safety audit. I just told you could audit at lots of different stages of a project, very early planning stage or detailed design or an existing road. But in every one of those audits, you follow the same steps. Okay, the steps are the same. You just might be provided different information, different plans, different, there's in Austroads, they talk about 10 steps in a road safety. So there's 10 steps. And I'll take you through those, and I'll also point you at where you can find some more information. Okay. So there's a directional sign before I jump into some of those words. Out near the Ballarat area, obviously. I'll give a prize for somebody who can tell me what might be interesting or unique or different or wrong about that sign. I'll give a prize for that. I'll come back to that while I do some talking and people have to think about that. Okay, auditing is a fairly straightforward process. It's got these 10 steps. The audits take time. I've got to stress that. This is not a quick exercise, usually, not just a, quick half an hour at lunchtime, do an audit. There's a full process to follow. They really do add value to the project. We saw the BCRs, but also, there's lots of good benefit we get from road safety auditing. And they really need to be an integral part of the design process and used appropriately by road controlling authorities. I'll come back to that sign. I saw lots of good things. Kez has got her work cut out for her, trying to work out who's first in the right answers when I get to it, but we'll deal with that when we come to it after I jump through this process. So the way road safety auditing works is that, and these are the 10 steps, the road safety audit team is selected by the client. Who is the client? Well, the client is the end asset manager of the facility. In most cases, that is the road authority, the local council, the state road authority. So they select the team. Now, if you are, some jurisdictions will pass that responsibility to a developer, if it's a developer-funded works, subdivision or something like that. Technically, the local government or the state authority, if they're accessing onto an arterial road, is the one that would be able to say, this is your audit team. But most practices, that's delegated to the developer with some instructions, got to be somebody who's qualified and it's got to be on an approved list and these sorts of things, but they let them choose that. Background information is provided, all of that stuff we talk about, all the designs and everything like that. And then there might be a commencement meeting. And that is where there's a good opportunity to exchange any information that's missing or ask questions, get clarification. And the documents are really looked into, and that's really predominantly done by the road safety audit team. It's just, I suppose, client is in there in case there's questions and they need to give more intel and information. Then the audit is conducted, and that is really the site inspection, the reviewing of the documentation, finding all of the issues and the like. They write all of that up. They issue the report over to the client. There is some sort of completion meeting or exchange of, final information and everything there. Then the client sort of responds to all of those findings and says, yep, okay, we can do this one, we can do that one. Agree with you here, but we can't afford to do that. So we're going to do this instead. And, it works through all of these Now, it's up to them as to whether they hand it back to the audit team, because it's their, that is optional. I encourage it, but the job is kind of done at this stage for the audit team. And the client implements changes. Agreed. That they've said, yep, okay, we're going to do that. So I'll take you through that sort of quickly, and then we'll pause for an opportunity to ask questions. So a road safety audit team has somebody appointed as the team leader. Okay. Now they need to be a senior person in terms of their experience. In most jurisdictions, we talk about them as a senior road safety auditor, but some jurisdictions have level 3 for New South Wales. So essentially, though, for this audit, they get the cap as team leader. You can then have auditors, and they're people that either don't have as much experience, or maybe they do have as much experience, they just didn't get the hat put on them for this audit. And then you can have others, people who are part of sort of the audit team to a degree, but sort of not. I mean, those can be observers. So we call people observers often if they have maybe specialist knowledge that they are giving, maybe like specifics of a barrier system type or configuration, but they're not doing the whole audit. They're just giving that particular specific advice. Or maybe the principal of the local school comes out and tells you a bit about staff, or maybe the police officer gets their input. We wouldn't call them necessarily as part of the audit team unless they're going through the whole process with us, and they have been through an appropriate road safety audit course and have that qualification. Trainees are really people who have, are getting themselves involved in audits, may not have yet completed an official course, or in some jurisdictions, they say, well, they've completed the course, but before we give them auditor status, we want them to be involved in some real audits. So it's the client's responsibility to appoint the team, but they may delegate that to others to do. Okay, we audit in teams. We want to make sure everybody is independent, and only a senior auditor can lead the team. And we ideally have a mix of professions, road safety experience in maybe engineering, or maybe human factors and ages, and empathy with all road users, and males and females and others, and we want this very diverse group. The practical realities often mean that we don't get that, but if you can keep that in mind and potentially strive towards that, I think we do a good job. This one, for example, I had myself and Michael and Johan, and we're all male engineers, about the same age, all worked for about 15 years in road authority, in the same road authority, basically the same office, doing pretty much the same work. We kind of look at a road environment the same. That's how we have been brought up. So we asked Wendy to join us in this audit to give us a different perspective. Wendy's a bit older than us, female. She's a scooter rider. She's not an engineer. So it gives a nice, different perspective for us to ponder. Now, can you do a one-person audit? The answer is that it's discouraged, but technically possible, but you would need to prove that it's sort of a low-risk project. Okay. So yeah, it's one of those ones where I just say we like to audit in teams, and that is best practice. But you could, with the absolute letter of the Austrade's guidance, you could do a single person audit. Okay. So you're going to get all this background information, hand over all this background information, designs and everything like that, some sort of exchange of information. The audit team's going to look at the documents and get out there and do the audit and inspect the site during the daytime and the nighttime. So don't forget to count your wallies. Why are we looking out there at daytime and nighttime? Well, we want to see the nighttime conditions, and things can pop up at night. So here's one very obvious one when you see it. So North Croydon up to the left there, very obvious during the day, not so obvious at night. The retroreflectivity is gone on the side. Okay, that that has some safety implications, just in people not being able to. It's probably not a super high risk, but it's certainly worth knowing. You would only pick that up at night potentially, unless you had a retrometer and put it on the sign, but that's beyond what an auditor would likely do. But there's also other things that are sometimes a bit more nuanced in how you think. Example one is that an audit we were doing, we had the team out there during the day, we were looking at a new alignment of a road, and did a lot of looking, and then came back at night and we looked at the road in the same area and sort of positioned ourselves where the new alignment would be, and the headlight glare at a particular point was really bad from a road very close there, that we just didn't pick that up during the day. And so that that then resulted in us recommending either an altered alignment at that point or some glare screening, and that stuff's interesting. Sometimes the lighting presents visual deceit. It'll come on, you go, wow, actually now it looks like the road goes that way, but it actually turns at that point. But it's the lighting that's really doing that. Or maybe an area becomes particularly active at night with nightclubs or something like that you're not as aware of during the day. So we're trying to factor all of that thinking into our auditing, and that's why we get out there at night as well. Kids, I think quite a few people had something to say about this, didn't they?
Yeah, just going back quickly about Sadnam's asking, at least how many members should there be for the audit team?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. There is no limit to the numbers you can have. There's no limit specified anywhere in the Austrade's guide. And a prize for the good question, I think. The practicalities of it, I'll tell you now, you don't want to go more than can fit in a car. It just becomes unwieldy. You're trying to wrangle people, and you got sometimes like OH&S issues, and you're a group and you're standing out there, and then you've got like, for me, optimal is 3, but 3 or 4 is great. There's a lot of road safety auditing that is just done as 2, and that's usually fine. And as I say, 1 is very rare. But yeah, I mean, if you're up at sort of 8 auditors in an audit team, it's just out of control usually. Just logistically, trying to coordinate people to get onto the site at the same time and do this and all of that. Yeah, mess. Okay.
So yeah, the comments about this roundabout. I think the first person to comment was R. Logan, saying the wrong way around the roundabout. but the first person to mention that the gap was in the wrong place was Alistair.
Okay, well, they're both on that. And so the first thing people might be pondering is, do we have gaps in roundabout signs? And the answer is yes, we do. And I don't think you'll be able to drive past a roundabout sign or walk past a roundabout sign now without looking for a gap. But that gap is in the wrong spot. Why is the gap there? Well, it's a very subtle clue as to which way we should drive around the roundabout. That's why they can both have prizes, because they're both sort of on it. So there's a correct roundabout sign. Now, this is where I'm going to ask a question. Well, let me say two things. If I saw this sign in a road safety order, say it was existing conditions, if it was in a design, I'd point it out, it'd be changed. If it's there, what would I do in terms of risk rating this? So I'm just going to say, logically and realistically, how much death and serious injury to our community are we expecting as a result of that gap being in the wrong spot? And I would say not much at all, right? And so in reality, in a road safety audit, this is likely not even to make the risk rating in my audit. And I will simply put it in there as a to note. It's wrong. Don't get me, it's wrong. There is some sort of safety element to this, right? But it's so, it's small, but it's wrong. So I put it in as a to note. But where in the road environment do you think I might elevate this and actually say, I'm going to put this in as a risk rating? Any ideas on where in the road environment? Okay. So, Kez, you can work out who that is because it looks like a username, but they've said the Great Ocean Road, and then it's coming in also with overseas tourist areas and the like. And that's what I'm wanting people to understand a little bit of. We need to contextualize all this risk rating and findings and think about it in the context of the road environment. So here's one that did make a risk rating because this is the first, pretty much, it is the first roundabout you hit coming out of Hobart International Airport. And so, you think, well, we're going to have and this is, from the rental car place as well. So, we're going to have these internationals, they're going to come in, they're going to get their rental vehicle, they're going to drive out. Okay, maybe they're used to driving on the wrong side of the road. Maybe they're not from a country which doesn't really use roundabouts much. Now we're into a scenario where there's a bit more risk to it. I still wouldn't say it's high risk, but it's up a little bit. So I put that in just to sort of show you that you want to think holistically and contextually about risk. I think it's always fun to know these little things that are subtle, subconscious ways that we try to guide road users, like little gaps like this and little bits and pieces, but just, risk rating according. And I also wanted to tell you that you can put to note in your road safety audit. So, if there are very minor things that, you go, I don't like this. See, there's sort of a risk, but I'm drawing a really long bow to make this an actual, risk, but you can still note things. Okay, so we then need to write up a road safety audit report. Okay, and what we're going to do for this course is we're going to give you a template road safety audit report, and we are going to say to you, we want you to use this in the future. Take it, rebrand it, use the words that are in there, the standard words about what's a road safety audit and all of these things. And we're doing that because the most important thing is consistency of what is being produced as an audit community. So you'll get that, and you'll use it for your audit later on in this course, so you'll get a good idea of it. But we've got, a description of the project and the audit stage. The list of information provided is actually quite important, and I think is sometimes forgotten or not given the attention it deserves. The reason I say that it's really important is that you want to say, we got this information and this plan number and this revision and this date, because you may find yourself in court talking about an audit that you and team undertook, and there's been an incident, and you may not have audited what was actually built, and that just wants to be clearly documented. And we've seen a bit of that play out. I've been involved in a few of those, and it's always just there's no argument. It's clear cut when you've got the version of the design. It's completely different to what was built, and there's no arguing on that. You list the team members, the dates the audit was carried out, and then inspection, and then your safety issues. So there's a sort of sample table of contents. As I say, we're going to give you this template it's got lots of existing stuff, and it conforms with the latest Austroads guide to road safety, part 6, which is road safety audit. So you're just using this as a template. You are meeting those requirements. So the audit report is then all packaged up, handed over to the client. There may be some sort of completion meeting discussion. What do you mean by this? And the like. And then the person that's received the report, they then write their responses to each of the findings and then implement. Okay, so this report's given to the project manager, emailed through or whatever. You should keep file copies. Everybody should keep file copies and an archive of all their audits. And then the project manager really does need to write responses to these findings. It's got to be done. And the reason I'm stressing this is because we have seen, and I did internal audits of government departments sometimes to find road safety audits were done and nobody ever did anything with them. They just ticked a box and said, we've done a road safety audit. But that's useless if all of the findings and recommendations are not either actioned or, dismissed. So if you're the project manager, you're getting a road safety audit done, a few things to remember. The responses could become public, so you can make sure you respond, but they could become public, so just be aware of how you're doing that. And it's good practice to give the audit team the sort of all your responses. That's a nice going out. They like that. It's not an absolute requirement though. And once the audit team's handed the report over, their job is done. They're not responsible for tracking whether you do or don't do anything with that audit report. It's done. So a bit of a common misunderstanding maybe there. So if you're a project manager and you receive that audit report, it's been done to help reduce risk in the project, but it's your project. You don't have to do anything that audit says. There is no legislative power to auditors and audit reports. You decide, okay, what is going to happen, what's not going to happen. But I do say that, think about it from your legal perspective, as well as, of course, more importantly, thinking about how do we protect our community. But if you are not going to do anything that the auditor says, you really want to back that up with some pretty good evidence. Because, if it did come down to the track and the auditor had said a whole lot of things and something happened and you just said, no, not not going to do any of that, disagree, it's not going to play out well for you and your organisation in that sense. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything the auditor says. You may do other things. You might disagree with it, but actually back it up with some evidence or a study or another independent bit of advice or the like. But that's probably where I wanted to get to on that. But I will take questions if anybody does have questions on that at this stage, Kez. And what do we got, about 15 minutes before our break?
Yeah, no questions have come in. I can let you know that Wayne is a county in Michigan, so USA. So Kalia was first on that one, but Luke did say, I just had USA. Luke did say 1911 USA. So yeah.
Okay.
A few prizes there.
Yeah. Wayne, Michigan, eh?
Yeah, and Rama actually said that before I even had a chance to look it up. So it's great.
Good. All right. Prize for anybody that's been to Wayne, Michigan. Actually, no, everybody will just say they have. We can't prove that. No, sure they'll. I've been to Michigan, but no, I don't think Wayne, Michigan.
Oh, I think there's a question in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
When
Cool.
RSA report is submitted to council, can we ask clients to follow all recommendations?
Okay, so by that I assume you mean like a developer. So like a developer gets an audit done, there's a whole lot of recommendation, and council has the final say on everything, and can they just require the developer to do everything? The answer to that is yes, because you're the road authority, you're the road controlling authority. Now, it may play out that the developer then challenges that and says, well, we will take you to court because that is unreasonable requirements on us accessing the public road network. And then it will play out in court. But yeah, I mean, your job as a council officer and the like is to make the appropriate judgments in those situations. The road safety audit is a professional advice piece to help you make that call. But it doesn't, it doesn't void council officers of the requirement to actually make those calls as to whether that is, reasonable for them to be able to do that or not. I mean, I used to be the manager of planning for the Victorian government for one of the regions, and so that was for Vic Roads, and developer funded stuff was a nightmare, and it's a nightmare because they're wanting to just build stuff as cheaply as they can. Of course they are. They just want to sell what they're selling and do it as cheaply as possible. They're out there to make money. We want to encourage development and things to happen and growth in the economy, but we really, often struggle because we can see we want to do really great safety upgrades, but you can't take advantage of a developer in that sense and get them to pay for everything for the public road network, because that's just not fair and it's hampering the economy. And then you've got to find this balance, and then you've got dodgy traffic engineers sometimes that well, I mean, it's probably a bit harsh, but if you're thinking that it's compromising the safety for questionable things. And anyway, I think anybody who works in that space knows the complexity of it, and road safety audits are just one of the tools we use to try to get appropriate safety for those sort of situations. That was a long-winded answer, wasn't it, Kez?
That's all right. There's a couple of other questions come in. So Regina's asking how RSAs help to reduce risk in the case of post-construction.
Yeah, so it's not as beneficial usually because it's built and people are very reluctant to change it. So you end up after construction doing those checks of the signs and lines and those sort of things and looking for stuff, and you get some minor improvements and changes if things have gone wrong or altered. And it's almost a check that the construction process hasn't built anything that causes any issues. So usually the design's been worked through and thought about and the like, and audited and all that's worked through, and then just has this building process created any issues, be it mistakes, not building to design, or just the way it happened to be built or play out has caused issues. Often, and those who have worked a lot in road construction know that, yeah, it all looks great on the design, and then you actually get in there and start to try to build, and you hit a service, or it wasn't marked, or some some new bus stop has gone in since and they make some changes, and hopefully they talk to designers about it. But sometimes it's not built exactly as the design, and you're checking that as well.
And Kalia there's asking, at the completion meeting, if the client doesn't agree with the recommendation, do the road safety audit team need to be involved again to assess alternate options? Yeah,
it's a good question. That's up to the client as to, they can go back to the audit team, and this happens a bit, and say, we can't do that for this reason, but we're going to do this instead. Do you think that is sufficient, or what do you think that will do to the risk rating? And the auditor can provide that, or the audit team can provide that answer. Often, though, that the client is confident enough in their resolution that they don't re-audit it or get that extra input. But yeah, in theory and best practice, it would be checking with the auditor on their thoughts on that.
And another question in the Q&As. Do you have an opinion about councils that get RSA done just because they don't have the confidence or ability to trust their own designs or staff?
I would like the all road authorities to have the people in there that have that knowledge, but I know the challenges of staff and people moving on and all of those challenges. So I do prefer that at least somebody with the qualifications and skills and knowledge has eyes over this and takes that safety perspective rather than not. But of course, in theory, I'd like all road authorities to have those skills in-house. Yeah.
Our Logan as well says, if you're involved in an audit early in the design process that influences the design, are you then part of the design process and not able to undertake RSAs later in the design process?
Another good question there. So the answer is no. Now, you can use the same audit team in all stages of a project. And yes, they will influence what is, I suppose, designed in the general sense, but they're not doing the design. And I do often encourage auditors to not be super prescriptive with their design changes. So you don't calculate, well, I was going to say you don't, calculate specifics for them, but sometimes you do. But no, that is not seen as being a designer if you're the auditor that suggests changes. So yeah, that's clarified in the Austroads documentation. You can do that. So some people and some jurisdictions and the like seem to like to have a different auditor at different stages of a project or a different audit team. they get different views on it. Some like to have that consistency so people are able to, follow that project through.
I think that's all the questions I can see for now.
Yeah, we're getting some really good questions from this group. That's excellent. Let me just get us started on pedestrians, and then we will take our stretch break and coffee break. So in the Austroad syllabus for a road safety audit course requires us to obviously go through the process, which we're sort of doing, and we've done well there. And there's other requirements, but we have to look at specific road user groups and just flag, specific needs for these road user groups, and ensure that anybody coming out of the course is thinking about all of these road user groups: pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, car drivers, truck drivers, and any others that appear there. So this is the first of those particular road user groups we're going to jump into and look particularly at, and this is pedestrians. Okay. So what I want to do with this little bit of the module is to look at some requirements of pedestrians for safe travel, point you at some technical information on infrastructure for pedestrian safety. We'll look at some common road safety audit issues, and we'll also look at some case studies of crashes that have happened, and we'll try to use those to build our understanding of risk, and so we can try and prevent them before they happen in the future, and understand some basic pedestrian terminology. I might get some prizes out for this. There are 4 groups of pedestrian, categories of pedestrian, that present the greatest risk. Pop your ideas in, we'll give a prize for each one. Yeah, I think we've got them all quickly too. So, Kez, that's your challenge to figure out who's getting the prizes there. Elderly, young, disabled, and intoxicated. Now, it's slightly different lenses on risk for each one, because we have what I term individual risk and collective risk and the like. But let's unpack that. Elderly do present a high proportion of our pedestrian trauma, and partly due to their vulnerability. So some very low speed and what would otherwise be considered a minor incident results in serious injuries and fatalities sometimes. Also, lack of ability to move quickly can sometimes play into it. And what was the other one? Oh, a little bit like young here, but cognitive processing ability decline, ability to review complex scenarios and make appropriate judgments starts to decline. Young have that challenge as well in terms of cognitive processing ability. They haven't built their cognitive pathways well enough yet. They're building those. Kids have that other challenge of the darting out from places and being very nimble and quick and appearing and being smaller and hidden behind things. So they're all challenges. Kids are actually very resilient to force, and they're able to withstand a huge amount of force, actually. But we see, unfortunately, that their height causes a lot of trouble with vehicle crashes where they are struck. They strike harder parts of the vehicle, or the vehicle strikes them with harder parts of the vehicle, so we don't get to sort of utilize the benefit of their ability to withstand force. So we've got disabled as an overall amount of death and serious injury to people through the sort of this big category being that they maybe they have mobility devices or maybe vision impairment or these sort of things. But at an individual risk level, they are quite high. And we know that they can be trapped on the road, or they don't get correct information about crossing points or the like. And those are important safety things that we need to consider. But the biggest group in terms of death and serious injury in Australia, New Zealand, almost around the world actually, are intoxicated pedestrians. Huge overrepresentation. And we can get annoyed at that and say, well, they shouldn't be drunk and on the road, or shouldn't be, they've got to take some personal responsibility and all of that. But the reality is that there's just huge amounts of it. And we need to, as road safety auditors, be looking at the road environment, understanding if there's increased likelihood of, intoxicated patrons of places coming out in different spots, and adjusting our infrastructure accordingly to cater for this. So there are three basic, this is pedestrian sort of safety 101 strategies we've got: segregation, separation, and integration. There are sort of options. Let me go through them one at a time just to clarify in your mind. Segregation is basically to say, well, this is your place, cars and trucks and motorbikes. And over here is your place, pedestrian. You're not to share these areas. And freeways are a good example, or motorways. Also malls and pedestrian only areas are a good example. And so that's our segregation. Separation in time is where you use the same bit of road at one time for pedestrians, at one time for vehicles. So classic pedestrian crossings or traffic signals are very much that. Or school crossings are also that as well, as many of you would know. Or these sorts of crossings where people can cross in all different directions. I'll give a prize if somebody can tell me what the official name for this is. Not scramble crossing. I mean, that is what most people would probably call it, a scramble crossing, but you really know the official name for it. There's a good traffic engineering trivia night question that we'll see if anybody can answer it. Okay, I think Alistair and Emily about the same time came in with a Barnes dance, and Ash has come in and told us where this one is. So Ash can have a prize as well. It is in Footscray, and for the eagle-eyed amongst us, it's not actually a Barnes dance, but I put it up there too. It's actually not, but the pedestrians just cross all the ways that they want anyway. Separation in space is your footpaths, your refuge islands, and the like, where within the road sort of reserve, we're separating those. And in your pedestrian refuges and the like, there's always, a standard or a guideline that you can look at. Here's 1 2 meter minimum desirable for, the width. I think this one might even be out of date or the like. But what I want you to do as road safety auditors, yes, find that it's worth looking at and understanding, but be practical and say, well, is this going to be wide enough for a bike to store there? If a bike's trying to cross the road, or if a father or mother's got pushing a pram, are they going to have to decide whether themselves or their baby is in live traffic? Or are we going to have lots of pedestrians crossing here? And is there enough area for all of them to store? So think practically and logically about it. Don't just blindly follow that standard. Think about other vehicles or other pedestrians. So the mobility scooters and then different things. Are we providing for them? I think I might pause there, Kez, just because I don't actually know where a good place is to have a convenient stop. I'll leave this on the screen, which is a pedestrian overpass, and we'll come back and we'll discuss whether it's effective or not effective as a safety treatment when we get back. And Ash knows where that one is too. We'll talk about that when we get back. But what do you reckon, Kez? I think we're going to have 5 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We'll have 5 minutes and we'll come back into it. And so fill up your coffee, have a stretch, and come back to you in 5 minutes for more pedestrian safety. Okay, a little bit of commentary around the pedestrian overpass. I suppose my point was, less about the specifics of pedestrian overpasses and more about the expected use of them and the like. And I just want everybody to just be aware that this is not necessarily your solve to all pedestrian issues, because people just don't use it. Some people use it, and that's great. And sometimes it's very useful for maybe school kids or elderly people. But you do have a lot of people who just don't use it and will walk across the road, and you continue to have a pedestrian risk. You might have lessened it a bit. So just be aware of limitations of these sorts of devices. And as an auditor, you can also think about what am I trying to say here? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought on that one. I'll come back to that. I wanted to jump onto the next one, which is shared zones. So shared zones, there's a shared zone sign. Now, a shared zone is it's in the road rules. It's a legal entity. That's a legal sign, and it has legal requirements within that whole zoned area, which are that motorists must give way to pedestrians for the whole area. And don't get this confused with a shared path, okay? And I see that a lot. A shared zone is a bit of road area that has this designation of vehicles must give way to pedestrians throughout the whole area. There is a bit of design guidance, which I think is really neatly put in a very short manner, that says what a shared zone should be designed like. What principles in this should this shared zone look like? And it's really useful as an auditor to think like this. I'll give a prize if anybody can sort of articulate that principle of design within a shared zone. I mean, there's principles like low speed and those sort of things, but it's one particular nice way to do it. Yeah, there it's come in. Alistair's on it again. It needs to not look like a road. That's a good shared zone. And in fact, if a driver is in there and says, am I even allowed to drive in here? That is a great shared zone. That's what we are looking for. Okay. So this one's interesting, down in Sale. So you can see the shared zone signage. They've put a supplementary sign, give way to pedestrians. Technically don't need to do that, but maybe they are also aware that not enough of our drivers know the particular road rules, so they've added that there. Why I say it's interesting is they've done some good things, like there's no curb, there's a different colour to the approaching road and the like, but then they've sort of gone with some other things that I think just make it really look like a road, like the line marking the straight alignment, cars parked on the outside. So yeah, some success, could be much better. There's lots of really great examples out there of better shared zones. I won't pop one up now. Okay. I'm going to give you some specific sort of things to look for as an auditor, and they will also include some specific examples and things that commonly come up. I see lots of good commentary on that sale one, so thank you. It's good, and I like the fact that people are talking to everybody, so we're getting that shared ability to look at that. Okay, let's start with sight lines to pedestrians crossing. So generally sight lines, and there's some well-documented ways to calculate sight lines. This becomes a very interesting one at these slip lanes. So a vehicle approaching a slip lane here, the driver will be looking at this way to see if they can put the foot down and go. And of course, we've got the pedestrian crossing, and we've got vegetation growing up, and so that's an issue. So one thing as an auditor, yes, you'd be looking at the vegetation and trying to open up those sight lines. And if you're looking at a plan in the detailed design end, it is often worth trying to get the landscaping plan and seeing, if there are going to be things that in the future will cause issues. Slip lanes in general have this challenge, and it's quite a hot topic of industry interest. So we've got, what is the appropriate treatment of a slip lane? If you can remove the slip lane, that is good. There are situations where it's very hard to remove slip lanes. But certainly this one is probably seen as not desirable, in the sense that there is nothing physically to slow the vehicle, to calm that vehicle, and there's some high speeds will be made where the pedestrian will be walking across that with priority and maybe not as alert to an oncoming vehicle. So raising these is excellent. Raised pedestrian crossings, or wombat crossing, or a raised signalised crossing is what we would be aspiring to in that sense. We want to think with pedestrians about where they're going to store and where the large vehicles turning have the potential to mount areas, or the swept path of that vehicle physically can't get around this corner without tracking over areas where pedestrians will possibly be. And we have seen fatalities and serious injuries involving this when relatively new intersections and large vehicles going around it, and pedestrians storing and doing what they do, on their phone or the like, and the large vehicle, just their back end going over the pedestrian. So it's something as auditors we want to look at. We want to look at our swept path diagrams. We want to see that vehicles can track around this without mounting those areas, and ensure that we've got that safe environment. And Jamie Robinson will take you through a bit of swept path analysis and how to look at designs and check for these sort of things. But it's the kind of thing we're looking at. We're also looking about what's not there sometimes. So this is a road that's going to be a heavy vehicle bypass route of the town, and it's got pedestrian activity. It does not have any footpaths, and so we know that pedestrians, if it's muddy, would walk on the road, but also in mobility, scooters or wheelchairs, or pushing trolleys and these sort of things, they're walking in the shoulder. So the lack of those facilities is something that can be brought up in your road safety audits. And another example here where the lack of facilities and people walking. We've got a roundabout gap. Yes, is in the right spot. Yes. Well done. So another term that is commonly used by road safety auditors is pedestrian desire line. Some of you use that quite a lot, I'm sure. The pedestrian desire line is the point between where a pedestrian is and where they want to be, and it's a straight line. And pedestrians will try to follow their desire line. And if we are putting things in place to try to stop them following their desire line, we can create scenarios which are worse. So this is an interesting one. So again in Footscray. So the pedestrian fencing there, and we've got the pedestrian desire line over to the station. We've got this one pedestrian who's decided, okay, I'm going to walk closer to my desire line. I'll walk along the road for a bit till I get to the gap. So that's their, they're not consciously and logically stepping that through. That's just how they go about it. So the implementation of the device, they're trying to corral pedestrians like sheep to go where the designer has wanted, can result in that more dangerous or potentially dangerous situation. And I want you to remember that anytime you see pedestrian fencing, don't just think about how it's going to, work if everybody sort of follows it, but how are people actually going to use this facility? And I, personally am not a fan of pedestrian fencing in most situations. I can very sparingly see its value sometimes. Places I really do like it, outside of a pub or a nightclub. I've done 2 coronial investigation reviews on pedestrian fatalities outside drinking establishments. One of them was people fighting that spilled out onto the road, and there was multiple fatality. And the other was a bit unclear. It looked like the gentleman fell somehow out again onto the road. And so, in those cases, pedestrian fencing is more a containment. It is a containment fence rather than trying to get people to cross at certain locations. And that's a similar one for outside school gates, thinking about containing the throng of kids that come out and, chasing staff or others or whatever it is. Yeah, when you get into trying to really corral pedestrians, it can be, it's also, it's also not a nice, livable city if you're treating pedestrians like sheep and trying to push them in specific spots. But anyway, that's slightly off road safety auditing. And here's a nice bit of, it's off social media, this one, which I grabbed, and I thought, oh, that's a nice way to sort of show pedestrian design line, isn't it? And we're trying to think about user experience and what they will actually do rather than, what we intend them to do with the design. Lots of examples of that. Jump through those, we don't need to see them. Okay, this one is just a picture from another country, which is showing large road which divides a community, and again, pedestrians will cross that. So these you can pick up in feasibility stages of audits and really understand that these roads need really good pedestrian facilities if they're going to be produced. We don't see a lot of this in Australia in terms of large roads separating communities without that thinking. And again, auditors may inject some of this in. Okay, I'm going to give this little case study. I will ask you a couple of questions. Okay.
There's a question in the Q&A there. How can we find the correct desire line if there are more than one pedestrian desire lines, especially in school areas?
Yeah. So, the example I used was one pedestrian and third desire line, but pedestrian desire line is the major sort of origin destination pathway that we're thinking about for pedestrians. Of course, there would be, sort of infinite specific pedestrian desire lines across our network, but we're looking for those more common desire lines. And you see that, you know that one street hits another street. Okay, the pedestrians are going to be corralled down. They'll be at one corner, and then they're going to get to the desire line is across that way. So yeah, you think about it in aggregate sense. Okay, let's have a look at this example. Another tragic incident. And as I say, road safety audits are not about analysing crashes. But why I do this in the audit course is because we want to understand what were the risks, what's sort of presenting risk, and how do we, look for these types of risks in designs before they're built or existing roads before crashes happen. So this is a road here, and we look at the next photo I'm going to show you is standing about there. Okay, so this is what the car sees. This is what the pedestrian sees, or that's from that location. Now, who has priority? Oh, yeah. Cars it is. I think Alistair's attempt to mash the keyboard quickly has resulted in cards and then restate it to cars. But I think David can have the prize there. But yeah, okay. I mean, vehicles have the priority here. But the design of this and just the way it's sort of come together, that it didn't take my colleague and I long standing there watching to see this behaviour where the pedestrians, these two gentlemen and lots of others did it. They sort of walk out and they really don't look for vehicles because it kind of draws you through. And they're just like, again, they would, probably if we stopped them and said, who's got priority and grilled them and really, they might consciously be able to say, no, actually we didn't have priority. But subconsciously, it's just, they cross. It's nice. And we know, like we get fixated often as technical people and, well, it's doesn't have the white lines. It doesn't have the correct pedestrian crossing sign. So it's obviously vehicle priority. It's not to the public that clear cut. And confusion of priority is a term I want you to really think about as an auditor. And I have a particular dislike for confusion of priority. I like it just to be clear. And we see things like this out there, and this one I can see why we've gone with this attempt at confusion of priority intentionally. I don't like it. I would like to see this just more as a pedestrian crossing, ideally a raised pedestrian crossing, lovely threshold entry in with proper pedestrian signs and raised and all of that. Because, the technicalities of this is an issue we've got to, as an industry, start to, actually do something about. So Alice has put up an interesting comment there. There is no confusion. Unfortunately, there is confusion. Technically, the road rules will say that pedestrians have right of way for any vehicle turning in from either direction. Not so much there though. And but all of that aside, like that's just technical road rule specific. All of that aside, this is an area where we just see all sorts of variability in how people use it. People don't know this road rule and they turn in and they take that. Yeah, so it's an interesting point for discussion. I know why this is in place, and it's because it is, and I think Alice is saying this, it is somebody trying to reinforce the road rules, but it doesn't quite technically do that. And I'm saying, why don't we just make it a pedestrian crossing? The reason for that is because of the State Road Authority not wanting it because it may impact congestion on the road. So I can see why we've ended up in this state. I just don't like it. But I, and again, we sort of see some things like this, which are, they're good. I really think it's a good treatment in terms of threshold in, slowing at a conflict point. It wins all round. But it, again, I say that it's technically altered. Could we not just have had this as a raised pedestrian crossing?
Ken, there's a question in the Q&A. Pedestrian crossings using alternative materials appear to confuse the priority issue, but how does RSA address this?
Yeah, again, I mean, we don't get caught up in specifics of, oh no, it's got the, it's got the line or it's got this. How are people going to perceive this? How do they genuinely use it? Okay, that's our role. So you might say, what the road rules say. Okay, it's fine that the road rules say that, but we've got an issue specifically here. Yes, we could look at bigger picture education campaigns, enforcement, wider legislative changes. The reality is we've got a job to do at a specific crossing point. And so either we make these raised pedestrian crossings, which I absolutely, I do it. I'm doing them everywhere I possibly can, because I'm all about having that pedestrian clear. Absolutely, all vehicles must stop. I'm just very conscious that there can be some drivers, and there's actually lots of them out there who do not give that priority to the pedestrian crossing. Now they're in the wrong, but the end result is, pedestrians are being hit. Okay, and if we can alter that, we should. Anyway, this is pretty good for me. I really think this is quite good in the sense that it shows that you're approaching a road. It's got that continuation of the road colour, and it's clear there. I would prefer it to be a pedestrian crossing through there, but if they're not going to have the pedestrian crossing, then at least it's clear that a pedestrian will stop and look around, and we've got the speed calming in there as well, with the raised sections. Okay, so lots of comments seem to be coming on that, and it doesn't surprise me. It's always an area of interest. The principle, the real principle for you to take away for all of the different scenarios out there is there confusion of priority, and how are people actually going to use these facilities? What do we got there?
We've got Henning asking on the last picture, is that a wombat that they need to count?
On the last picture?
The crossing.
Hang on. This one?
Yeah.
No. As it is, no, so it's not even a wombat crossing. There's some of the confusion. Anyway, I'll let the debate go along. I'll probably have to put out like an industry note on this or something, because there's a lot of interest in it. We did a pretty decent study and review of this for the Department of Transport about 7 or 8 years ago. Dig that out and start to get some clarity, but I think it'll raise its head again. I did see Victoria Walks put out a nice complimenting of the installation of regulatory pedestrian crossings across turning points. So yeah, there's lots of people with lots of views on this. It's good. That's what we want. We want industry discussion. We want people thinking about this issue as opposed to just putting it in the sand. Airports, on the other hand, they're a beast of their own, and there's enough road safety audit content for a whole course just from airport stuff ups, in my opinion. Anyway, here's Launceston Airport. Confusion of priority again. It's very unclear here. You've got cars picking up people, you've got all your passengers coming off planes out of here, and you've got your taxis shooting through here. Okay, it's raised, lowers the risk, great, but it's pretty confusing, isn't it? I mean, it is technically car priority through there, but just unclear. And there is, things like this, which, I can see what they're doing. They're trying to get people to cross at this location, and that's all nice. Again, I'd just like to see lots of actual regulatory crossings with pedestrian crossing sign legs and the line marking and the like, which line marking's missing on this one though. But anyway. Okay, so we're gonna jump through this because, let's duck down to Hobart quickly. And we talk about post-implementation, and I showed that roundabout with the arrow the wrong way, and these aren't just sort of rare freak incidents. We do see a fair bit of something going wrong in the installation. So this one, it's got whoever's been installing has got some confusion, and this is especially it. Like the pedestrian crossing signs throughout this whole scheme, whoever's installing has sort of believed that that is to show pedestrians where to cross rather than show vehicles that it's a pedestrian crossing. And it's almost laughable from where we sit, but that's happened. And you'd hope that a surveillance officer or the project manager is that they check that and that's rectified. But we as auditors are ones that can come through and do those checks and give that final assurance. Okay, a couple more examples from me, questions from that for you all, and then I hopefully will give you a couple of minutes to do your quiz at the end and catch up on your assignment. Okay, this is existing, obviously. Don't worry about the big lines through here. That just kind of activate a street and make it a bit, don't worry about that. Let's have a look at this crossing, and I want you to imagine that you've come here at design stage, okay? And I've asked you to do a design stage audit. So it hasn't been built and you're seeing the design, okay? I want you to tell me something you think you could tweak in this design that would improve safety. Now, I know some of you are going to want to raise the crossing, and I compliment you on that. That's good. But I want you to think of something you could tweak in the design here that would improve safety. But yeah, raising, I agree, it's great. That'd be excellent. But there's something else. I want to see if anybody's got. So people are seeing the issue that I'm trying to sort of point out, and it's around sight lines to pedestrian crossings, and I'm particularly interested in this site. And so, maybe we've got shorter pedestrians or the like, crossing here. We don't have good sight lines. The parking's also there. The small tweak would really be, even if they want to keep all of their vegetation and bin, would be to put it on departure side, wouldn't it? And that's a small tweak in the design. Okay, I can't quite see whether there's, some drainage or a service or something there. It's a small tweak in design. That's what auditors can inject in to give some safety benefits for often no extra cost whatsoever. It's just an arrangement of design and the like. So Kez, if you can find anybody in there you think needs a prize. I think there's quite a few people who had some good comments and some sort of pointing out the different standard setups for parking around crossings to keep sight lines open. It's funny, I think somebody's put in the 20-meter rule, which I always warn against just using that. I mean, that's a road rule related specific, and it does say in the road rules that you can vary off that 20 with signage. So as a council, you can do whatever you want. You can have no distance before the parking if you want. And the reason I am always warning on that is that I've seen some local governments refuse to put in raised pedestrian crossings because they need to get that 20 metres in their mind of parking. And these facilities would do wonders for the safety, the livability of an area, the ability for people to cross, but they're not doing it because of loss of potential parking, where there's not the risk there. And vice versa. I've seen situations where 20 meters doesn't cut it. And when you do your sightline calculations on approach speed, it just doesn't cut it. So either you need to slow vehicles on the approach or you need to create more. So I suggest you sort of take that one back to first principles always, and do your sightline calculations and figure it out from a first principles perspective, and it may alter your signage setup and your parking setup around pedestrian crossings. Okay, but good. Well done. We're starting to think like auditors now, aren't we? What are the risks? And what can we do and suggest to lessen that risk? Another case study, coronial investigation we were doing. This is the spot where a pedestrian stepped out and was struck by a vehicle coming through on the service road and killed. And here's an example of why you can really never do these sorts of investigation from photos and street view and the like. You need to get out there and feel, and I'll explain why shortly. So that photo I was just showing there was taken from here, looking that way. That's the service road we see going in. I'll go back a little bit further, and you can see we've got a 70km/h road here. We've got a shallow entry into the service road there. And let's go back a bit to here. Now, when you're there and you've got the green, this thing ticking at you, it really, you kind of just want to go. And it's kind of a visual deceit, see-through of the pedestrians, in a sense that they're focused on that, not the immediate. And we don't have CCTV footage or anything of this incident, and we can't be absolutely sure, but do have a feeling that there may have been some of that, or not looking immediately there because they're looking into the distance or whatever it was from that perspective. The speed is the severity factor on this one. So the fact that the vehicles are coming in here fast, and there's nothing to slow them down, and that's why the speed was why it resulted in fatality. And again, we want to get in there ideally before these incidents happen. When this intersection was first developed, this quite a while ago, I'm sure, but it would have been, if we were able to think of that continuity of the treatment, either with that or with some sort of raised crossing would be brilliant, and slowing vehicles on that entry. So we can try to look for those schemes and those ways we can reduce risk before that happens. So, the reactive part of road safety means that this is now a raised pedestrian crossing. But we want you to be out there getting this and suggesting these treatments in the design and before people are killed and injured. Any questions or comments I need to deal with there, Kez?
No, not that hasn't really been covered.
Okay, thank you. So a flag again, a common misconception is that a road safety audit is also a Disability Discrimination Act audit, a DDA audit. And it's not. An auditor may point out DDA issues. So you might decide that the lack of tactiles or the grade of the ramp is going to present a risk of death or serious injury to our community, and then you would report it. But you are not obligated as a road safety auditor to point out things that do not meet the Disability Discrimination Act, but you can't link to a road safety issue. okay? Because they are two different things. What I would say is be very clear with your client if you're asked to do a road safety audit that it's not a Disability Discrimination Act audit, and that it's a separate entity, and that can be done. If you notice things, you might say it, but you're not giving that sort of tick off, you have met the act or the requirements of the act. Through that.
Sorry, Ken, I
Yep.
did miss Sadnam's comment about the speed on that service road being 50 miles an hour.
Yep, 50 kilometres an hour.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's okay. It was, and that's high, and that's part of the reason why we see that severity of the incident that occurred. And part of we would like to slow that. I would dare say, even though if you put a lower speed limit at that location, the high speed and the low entry angle of the main road and the entry in there means that the operating speeds would have probably been as high. So the raising of that crossing is so important, and ideally would have been to make some raised thresholds around that entryway to really slow vehicles further back, but How are we going on time here? Beautiful. Okay. I'm going to give you a little challenge here. Now, I'm going to say this from the start. Shortly, a poll is going to pop up on your screen, and that's how you're going to answer this one, okay? So don't write anything into the chat for this one. A poll will pop up shortly. I'll just explain what we're looking at. This is an existing intersection, and this is you now practicing identifying road infrastructure characteristics and design that present risk. Just in this case, I'm using an existing intersection that has a history of death and serious injury. Now, there's a specific crash type that is happening at this location that involves pedestrians being struck. And I think we've said, I think it was 4 serious injury crashes, handful of others, and a lot of sort of reported near misses and the like. And it is in one particular crash. And remember, a poll's coming up for you to vote on which it is, because I'm going to give you some options. Okay, so option 1 is, in crash diagrams, we always use a dotted line as a pedestrian and a solid line as a vehicle. So 1 is that the pedestrian is crossing at this point and a vehicle turns over them. 2 is the pedestrian's crossing at this point and a vehicle turns over them. 3 is that the vehicle is coming up the service road and a pedestrian crosses from the island out and is struck. 4, same as 3 except for the other road there. And 5 is turning over pedestrians walking on the footpath. So one of these crash diagrams represents all of that death and serious injury and all those incidents I've been talking about with the exact same crash type. All of them have a level of risk. I'm just seeing if any of you can pick which one. So Kez, let's pop that poll up. Now you'll be able to grab that and move it around your screen if you want to relook at the intersection and choose the one you like. And then we'll have a bit of a chat about it. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so to have a look at that. Give it another 5 seconds. Have your guess. Some of you really want to remember, you don't get marked on this, and in fact, we don't even know who votes for what. So feel free to just guess at will. And 3, 2, 1. All right, Kez, let's end that. And let's share the results there. Okay, most of you have gone with number 1 there, and then number 2, 3, a few for 5, and 1 for 4. Okay, let's stop that and get rid of the poll. I'll give you the answer, which is 2. Now, I'm absolutely fine with people have pointed out some of the other ones, because as I say, there is an odd configuration going on at 1. There is, some inherent risk in some of the others. And so it's not like, wrong, but there's just particular characteristics of 2 that are bad. And it's partly due to the thing that I talked about earlier, which is that a vehicle at this point is looking up this way. And the configuration of this is just odd, that the slip lane is on the right of the crossing point. So it should go into the island and then cross. So this should go over to here and then cross to here. Sorry, I'm making a bit of a mess of this slide, aren't I? Actually, I can just show you what it should look like, because it's what it now looks like. You can see that it goes into the island and then it crosses and then it goes. And that's because that vehicle that's right there at that point is looking up there. And just the way that the phasing was sitting when it had the crossing to here is that just as they get their gap, or all these vehicles are starting to stop and a vehicle's coming up here, they go, oh, okay, great, they're stopping, is just as the pedestrian is getting the green light to go. So we are seeing that occurring quite a lot. Again, your role as a road safety auditor is to try to identify that when it's a design and say, no, that's going to cause trouble, and suggest that they reorientate that. So people are talking about location 1. Yeah, not great at all. I'll agree with that. It's not orientated to the crossing. I think that's a minor-ish issue. I mean, the fact that you're going to have vehicles approaching here with indicators on and it's unclear, are they going to turn in here? Are they going to turn there? I think that's all weird. But at this point, they are fairly much looking forward a vehicle, so our risk is lower. So, and you've got good open sight lines across there and there for that vehicle. It's as they approach about here, they're looking up that way. That's why it just goes up. Okay, so as an auditor, we want you to get out there at times when we'll see different activities. So the end of school, the start of school, if you're around a school, see how that all operates. If there's a football ground in the area, ideally you want to get there when there's a home match on, or trying to see this operating in its different times helps you to understand risk. Practically, you may not be able to actually do that, like the football game, or it might be school holidays, and the audit's in the 2 weeks for school holidays or like, but if you can, you should be seeing it in these different times. Of course, recommendations, lots of stuff out there, and I'm going to point you at a few things shortly. Actually, I may go back. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to here, because I have had some people through the course, and I use this one as an example. I've used it for a few years now, because I think it's a really clear, vivid. The design of this intersection has caused those serious injuries and the like, or has been a heavy contributing factor. And I get some people who get a bit concerned. They go, oh, I'm really worried. Like, that's pretty important. And I didn't really see that immediately. And if I miss this in audits, that's pretty serious stuff. And I say, well, okay, I gave you a minute to look at this, first of all. And in a real audit, you've got days to look at your design, and I systematically would work through a design like this to understand risk. So I would actually put myself, imagine myself as a vehicle driver coming up here, and I'd say, all right, I need to turn right. Is it clear where I go? What do I do? Can I see everything I need? Okay, now I need to go straight. Are the lanes aligning? Do I know where I go? Is that looking? Okay, now I need to go left. I go, okay, I'm going to go left. Oh, where do I go? Do I go to this one? Do I go to that one? Okay, I've got a bit of a flag on that. And then I go, and then you might be a bike and you want to do all of those turns, and you're a pedestrian. And so you're really working through all of these, and you start to find these issues. So Sam's making the point, crash data would have helped. Absolutely. Like the crash data tells the story when it's an existing road like this and there is an existing deficiency. But what your job as an auditor is, more often than not, it's a new configuration. There is no crash history because it's a new configuration. So you've got to design and you've got to try to pick all of the crashes without having a crash history, because they're going to come in the future. So that's the challenge often as an auditor. So somebody I assume the UK started off on a bird theme for pedestrian facilities, and everybody seemed to stick to it. But we've got lots of facilities: the Puffin crossing, the pedestrian user-friendly intelligent crossing, which is like the little device when you walk up to your house at night and it turns the lights on for you, but that just keeps the light red for vehicles. So pedestrians, there's movement on the crossing, it holds that. We've got, there's the little addition you can retrofit nicely. Toucan crossing, this is again just a legal reason that you're going to put, toucan cross. I'm not making up these terms. That's what they're actually called. Toucan cross, like as in pedestrians and cyclists. Pelican crossing, pedestrian light controlled crossing. So the driver sees a red light at the pedestrian crossing, and then they see a flashing orange, which gives time for pedestrians to clear, and then it goes to a green. That was like in the world top 100 funniest road signs, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense to me. But anyway, I can see what their amusement was. Pegasus crossing. So yeah, riding a horse is driving a vehicle, or the vehicle, so it needs its legal entity to cross. And there's lots of little nuances like this. Did you know though that it is illegal to ride a horse when you're intoxicated, because that is drink driving? But it is not illegal to ride an intoxicated horse. Kes is already sick of that joke. Okay, I better conclude this, and I will conclude it by saying you work in audit teams, so you will have lots of people looking at these designs. You'll have time to review them, and you'll have time to think through all of those issues. So you will find stuff, and even more than that, Austroads has prompt lists of questions there to get you thinking, and pedestrians and cyclists are in there, and it talks lots about what's the pedestrian desire line, other things that block that desire line, where will drivers be looking as they turn, lots of that stuff. And they're in part 6, and it's going to help you a lot. Okay, it's not a checklist that you tick everything off and your audit's done. You've got to think holistically, but it's really it's really helpful. I'm not going to do the quiz, and in fact, I'm going to stop the presentation. Take any final questions. David could have a prize for making me laugh and saying that the horse is not roadworthy. Okay, that was a good session. Lots of interaction there, lots of commentary. We could have taken any of those issues and talked 2 hours on them, so I had to move along quickly, but I do thank everybody for their input. You've got a quiz to do. It's in the learning management system. Do that quiz, finish off that assignment. You're going to have next week a bit more of a meaty assignment to do. So we want you to be up to speed by that time. Anything else, Kaz? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. We're going to be back on Tuesday next week at 10:30 again.
Yeah, log in a little early for a chance to win a prize. And thank you for your wonderful input. We'll catch you all next week. Bye.